This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
10.
It's 10:08 at WPSL 1590, the talk of the Treasure Coast. And you're on Ask Dr. Rabbi.
And this is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chaim, your Jewish home on the Treasure Coast. And it is a beautiful Friday morning in the Hebrew month of Kislev in December. And Chanukah is coming. Ay, ay, ay. Not that far away, about 10 days.
Light those menorahs.
You know, it is. We're going to light it a week from Sunday, actually. Yeah, that evening.
You are early this year.
Yeah.
Well,
no.
Not really.
It's later than last year.
Yeah.
Last year, it was kind of like burning the turkey's feathers.
It was, literally.
Actually, I have a really, every once in a while, the calendar, of course, jiggles because it's a lunar calendar, and the solar calendar that we operate on secularly are different. Ooh, let me adjust this because I can hear me.
And
I shouldn't hear me. There we go. I love technology when it reminds you what to do. As I started to say, so the two calendars jiggle in respect to each other. Excuse me.
I feel real inferior when my Apple phone is a lot more intelligent than I am.
It's so hard to explain to today's youth what it was like before cell phones.
Oh yeah, it's funny. Funny you say that. We had that discussion on the bus coming back from.
The idea of not having something at your fingertips.
Oh yeah.
I can remember when the first few people that I knew that had smartphones, and they'd be asking the phone questions, and I was like, "Really? How are you doing that?" And now I do it. Times change, right?
AI.
But yeah, Chanukah. So Chanukah is always on the 25th of Kislev, and Kislev is the winter solstice month, as is December. But they don't coincide because one's tied to the sun and one's tied to the moon.
Right.
And the Jewish lunar calendar is intercalated. And what that means is that it has leap years so that it aligns with the solar calendar for seasonal reasons. Because people who farm, there are instructions to plant certain crops at certain times.
Sure. And
you kind of need to be on a solar calendar for the plants. They don't really care what the moon does. The ocean cares more about the moon.
That's why, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but the moon was the easy timepiece back in the day before coffee and before electricity.
Wait a minute. There was a world before coffee?
There was a world before
Folgers?
Coffee. Long before Folgers. Coffee is one of the crops that comes out of the Arab world, Arabica coffee.
Okay, yeah.
And they brought it to the world, and they gave us, midnight mass and sunrise services and Leil tikkuns, all those things that we do at night because we can now stay awake thanks to coffee. Back in the old days, you kind of went to sleep when the sun went down because there wasn't a whole lot you could do. Mm-hmm. But it is one of the reasons why the Jewish festivals tend to be on or close to the full moon because there's light.
Makes perfect sense.
It makes perfect sense.
It does, yeah.
The new moon is dark.
Yep. There's no doubt about it. Shots of the full moon, from the last couple days.
Oh, they've been gorgeous.
Oh. They had one shot I saw from Tucson that was just outrageous. By the mountains. It was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mountains give you some beautiful, beautiful
Yes.
scenery and shots.
Yeah,
I've got one of the last things that Bill and I did in Tucson was to take the trolley up to the 9th stop on Sabino Canyon, up to the very top, and I don't know if it's 9 stops anymore because they're always jiggling and switching in there. But we took the trolley all the way up and walked all the way down taking pictures.
Oh.
And I must have a couple hundred shots of Sabino Canyon.
Oh, what a place.
And
I don't think there was a trolley when Carol and I were there. Early 70s? I don't think so.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
There is a little wheeled.
I know we climbed it a couple, not very far, but
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
There's 9. When I was there were 9 stations on the tram that went up and down. I don't know exactly what they call it, but the thing you buy a ticket for.
Right. Yeah, it's a tram. Yeah,
and it costs, and they have small and big ones. But they'll go up into the canyon. And of course they've got that little tiny museum down at the base camp. And it's a lot of, Sabino Canyon is an amazing part of nature, as is the Mount Lemmon, with its 26 miles to go 8,000 feet.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
And
yeah, that's quite the drive, especially
in winter
when you hit the snow.
Yeah. Well,
or
yeah.
ice. You're right.
They actually close it sometimes.
Yeah.
And other times they limit it to chains only.
Mm-hmm.
A la California, you can't go in the mountains except with chains. And Mount Lemmon is like that. It's hard to believe that there's an incredible little ski resort up there. Some wonderful restaurants, and they've been rebuilding it since the fire and since the second fire.
Now, do you know how to put chains on?
I do.
See, I don't.
It's really easy.
Is it?
Yeah, it's really easy.
Okay,
Mostly you just lay it down and roll the car backward and hook them, and they just snap together.
Okay.
They're not hard.
Yeah.
And then they make a lot of noise.
I had the little Volks Porsche when I was in Connecticut for that year and a half, and I slid around a lot, but I never used chains. Yeah. Huh.
I can vaguely remember my father putting them on the car, mostly in California. And we never did go up Mount Lemmon. When
Time out.
Yeah.
California?
In the mountains. There are Rockies out there.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And it's like Mount Lemmon, where in certain weather, above X feet, chains are required.
Well, and actually, my old Dodger producer lived in Big Bear.
Okay.
And he used to have to
put chains on.
Yeah, to get home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, they're not hard, and you can take them on and off right at the snow. You don't have to drive around town with them and destroy the roads.
Yeah. Yes.
Because they really do dig in.
They do. Oh, yeah, you bet. Yeah.
And with good reason, because the car weighs a couple tons.
Yeah.
And digs in. So they are helpful. It's hard to believe that there is that. The other thing that I love about Tucson is the pass, going down to what used to be Old Tucson and down to the Desert Museum.
Mm-hmm.
That's an incredible ride as well.
Yes.
And to get out in that park in Saguaro National Park.
National Monument. Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So those are just some of the things from Tucson that I truly, truly miss. And one of these days, I will get myself back there and at least visit some things.
Us too.
Yeah.
We've got a couple friends who we worked in television with, actually at Channel 4 in Tucson and around the country. And, they're both living in Tucson. We've got to make some stops.
Yeah. And I'd like to go back to Biosphere 2 again.
See, that was way after we left, but that sounds fascinating.
It is. It's a fascinating. The University of Arizona now has it, and they're doing all kinds of wonderful environmental research and farming research in that facility.
I thought it was closed.
No, you can do tours of it. It's not being used to house experimenters living in the.
Okay, that's what closed down.
That's what closed down.
Gotcha.
But
okay.
now it's open to tours, and you can go through, and you can see the wetlands and the rainforest and the desert and the ocean. And I'm a little concerned because I haven't seen them advertising the coral reef. There was a live coral reef registered inside Biosphere 2. I have not seen word of that lately. So if somebody's been there and can tell me whether or not it's still alive in the ocean in Biosphere 2, that would be, I'd be interested to know that.
Feel free, give us a call.
They were 772. Thank you, 772-340-1590. Whether it's for Biosphere 2 or anything else that you'd like to talk about. And so Tucson has some gorgeous scenery. The other scenery that I miss, even from Ohio in the fall, not so much in the winter when the trees are bare. I don't like gray skies and bare trees. It's one of the things that I'm happy not to see, and even worse in an ice storm.
There was a Facebook post this morning that I showed Carol, the first snowfall in Ontario, Canada, and you see these bright red leaves still on the tree, and then, of course, snow on the ground. You know that they're not going to be on the tree very long.
No, they're going to fall down.
Yeah.
And the winter before we moved to Tucson, that last winter, we had one horrendous ice storm that just totally shut down the city, and it was Category 3 level. Yeah, not pretty.
Well, I remember it was a 78 when we were in San Diego and I was traveling with the Padres. We were supposed to open in Chicago, and it was that great snowstorm of 78 that just paralyzed that area. And we didn't play a game in Chicago. I mean, they were snowed out 3 times.
Wow.
And, it was unbelievable. I'm amazed we got the plane in and out of there, but we did.
I look back at some of the things that we did. We went to a dog show in Coba Hall.
Detroit.
In Detroit.
I've done games there, yes.
And that show is in March, and there was one year where we had gotten a late snow, and we were dry. In March.
Ooh.
Yeah. Early March, and the snow, a couple of the snow vehicles were off the road. They had fallen off the road, and we were going to Detroit in that. And I'm like, okay, here we go.
So normally
in a motorhome.
Oh God, that's right. You had the
motorhome and a van, and that's how we traveled to the shows.
So how long? It wouldn't be a long trip normally, but
it did slow us down. It took a couple extra hours. It was normally a 2 to 3 hour.
That's okay.
In that
that's
range.
What I thought.
Yeah, not that bad. The motorhome obviously goes slightly below the speed limit, typically.
Right.
And we used to park. Actually, they would allow the vendors for the show to park on the inside the facility, or on the parking lot of the facility
underneath. Yeah.
And so we would. It was nice, and we would take the people mover and go places. So it was a fun show. We went to the Blue Nile, one of the more interesting restaurants in the area.
Cool.
And I have great memories in the snow, but not of the snow.
Yeah.
The snow was there, and I don't miss not having to shovel it. I do get to tease my northern friends and tell them we shovel sunshine here, and I love that line.
When Canada was preparing for the Calgary Olympics, they flew us up from Los Angeles with our ESPN crew, and twice. And one of the trips, we went. Have you been out to like Banff and Lake Louise area?
No.
You've got to go.
Okay.
It is mind-boggling. There's a hotel at Lake Louise that every room looks out onto this glacier.
Oh, wow.
And it's like, oh, my goodness. And it's huge. It's a huge mountain of ice. And, yeah.
Lake Louise.
Lake Louise, yeah.
I have to look that up. I've got a sister-in-law who lives up in Uper in the Upper Peninsula. So she keeps saying to visit, but I plan to do that not in winter.
You need to talk to our morning guy, Mr. G. His son went to college up there in the Upper Peninsula.
He may have had my late brother, of blessed memory, as a teacher.
Oh,
he was a
wow.
professor up there.
Okay.
That's what took them up to that part of the world.
Okay, yeah.
And, yeah.
Well, G showed me some pictures. It's gorgeous.
It is gorgeous. I have one container of maple syrup still in my pantry.
Oh!
One left from my brother from his trees on his property.
Oh, wow.
He used to go out and tap the trees and boil the sap and make his own maple syrup. I've got one last little container.
He did it the real old-fashioned
He did it the
way.
real way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
He and the
amazing.
dog got some exercise tapping the trees.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I can't even comprehend that. I just...
What
that's
I want to
amazing.
know is how somebody figured that out originally, that you have to boil it. You boil 40 gallons of maple sap, which you have to tap the tree right at a certain time. The nights have to be below freezing and the days have to be above so that the sap starts to rise. And then you can tap it, and that's when it's got the most sugar in it. But 40 gallons
Wow.
of sap makes 1 gallon of syrup. And how somebody
What?
knew to boil it for that length of time, I'm guessing that they just successively got it sweeter and sweeter and sweeter until they got it down to right before it burns.
Wow.
Yeah. I love real maple
40
syrup.
for one.
Yeah.
That's hard
And you
to
get about
imagine.
10 gallons per tree. So you need 4 trees on average to make 1 gallon of. That's why maple syrup and maple candy are so expensive.
Never
so
even
good.
thought of that. Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful sweetener. So, yeah, it's got a flavor all its own, especially when it's real, not when it's not so much when it's faked. So let me switch back over because Hanukkah, as we said, is only a week and a half away, and Hanukkah is. I always get a kick out of this, and when I teach religion, I warn the students, Hanukkah is not an important holiday in Judaism. It's a fun holiday, and it's a great holiday for the kids, but it's one of the more minor holidays. The major holidays are Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Shabbat. The weekly Shabbat is important because it happens every week, and of course Yom Kippur, and Pesach, Passover, Sukkot in the fall, and Shavuot in the summer. Those are the big holidays. Next are the minor holidays such as Purim and Hanukkah.
Well, see, now I feel pressure that the priest tells me that I have to go to church on Christmas and Easter,
Creasters, yeah.
Creasters, so I could join you. And
Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur.
yeah, but those get out of the way in a hurry. So I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah, and the kids like Hanukkah because they get 8 days of gifts. It's the festival of dedication. Channuka means dedication. It was the dedication of the temple after after the Greeks had converted it to a Zeus temple. And when the Maccabees reclaimed it and cleaned it out and rededicated it to God.
And then they partied.
Well, it was a dedication party. And it's modeled after the festival of Sukkot, according to the book of Maccabees. And actually a thank you to the Catholic Church, because if the Catholic Church had not kept the apocryphal books, the books of Maccabees, it's not in Jewish scriptures.
Wait a minute, back up here.
The
What?
books close at the end of Esther. Esther and
Okay.
Daniel are the last books written that make it in.
So how did Maccabees get into this?
And if you read Maccabees, it's not extremely well written either, the books that survive, but I'm guessing they're the best. But that's after the Jewish scriptures close, after the book is closed. So Hanukkah is kind of an interesting thing. At one time, the rabbis actually wanted to eliminate the holiday because it's a pain. It's in the winter. It's not easy to travel before. We were talking about ice and snow. Imagine the Jerusalem mountains with a donkey, and the snow is not a fun time to travel, very dangerous, and people stopped traveling. They didn't do as much traveling. So there's not a lot of festival between fall, with Shmini Atzeret, which is the end of Sukkot, and the beginning of, right before Passover, we start Tu B'Shvat, the New Year of the Trees. There's not a whole lot in that window. Now, I admit that the month right after Sukkot, I'm perfectly happy not to have any holidays. And Thanksgiving is plenty for me. And this year even more so, but for a number of reasons. It's just been a very full season. Been a very full year.
Thanksgiving is kind of just an American thing.
It is. It's an American and it's called an American holiday. Canada, of course, has its Thanksgiving a month earlier. Not unreasonable given their climate, because they're going to lock down sooner. And their fall crops are going to be ready. They're going to be done growing because they're going to get frozen.
Wow. See, I'm fascinated that all this is tied to nature.
Of course it's tied to nature. You've got to have the foods for the festivals, or you can't have them. And if you have to truck them in from hundreds of miles to the south, that's not going to be effective. And that's part of why the Northern Kingdom and Southern Kingdom had so many arguments about calendar, because crops ripen later and the seasons end sooner. So their holidays are off kilter compared to the South. And of course the South won, or at least lasted longer, so the holidays are according to the Southern Kingdom of Judea.
Wow, okay.
So that's some history of it. But Hanukkah, when they come to Hanukkah in the book of Maccabees, it tells us that they wanted to do the dedication in Sukkot during the normal time when the temple would be dedicated. It's a great party. It's a carnival kind of event. Talmud says if you have never been to Jerusalem on Sukkot, you have not been to a party. So you can just imagine what it must have been like in the city, just absolutely crazy. But the temple they didn't succeed in getting it ready. But they didn't want to wait a whole year to rededicate it. And so they overlay it, probably over Diwali, because they say they're going to do it the same time as others are celebrating the lights. And I'm guessing that others that are celebrating the lights are probably the Hindus in Diwali.
Okay.
But that's a guess.
But
it makes sense.
Yeah,
it makes
does.
sense. Once you get the bigger picture of how the world is connected, thank you, Silk Road, through all of the trade caravans that are going. And, of course, Israel and Judea are part of that trade route because they're the land bridge between Asia and Africa. So unless they want to come through the Arabian Peninsula, the places where it gets kind of close, but they're going to still have to go over water. They don't have land bridges. But if you come across the northern tier, then you can come down through Israel and Samaria and Judea and make it into Egypt. So, of course, ideas are going to travel back and forth, and merchants are going to celebrate their native holidays and pick up new ones and move them back and forth. And so the festival is a festival of lights.
That's really cool.
But the lights refer to the dedication, because one of the big things that happened in Sukkot was that they would draw water all night at the pools of Solomon. It's very sweet water in the Judean hills. And the priests would take their robes from the previous year, because they would get new robes for Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, and Sukkot follows right after. So they would take the old linen and turn that into wicks, into big 40-log oil lamps. And again, Talmud says that you could see like in day. You could read and recognize people's faces. It was that bright where they were drawing the water, because they would do that all night in order to be able to pour it into the wine, to be able to have everybody have a drink.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's again, you can just try to imagine the scale of the festival that was going on. 70 oxen being roasted, and most people are going to eat about an egg size of meat. They're not going to eat a ton of meat. So 70 oxen are going to go pretty far.
So, okay, the 8 days.
Mm-hmm.
is there a significant
It's the same as
to each
Sukkot.
one?
Sukkot, well, that's the modern thing. Different groups have dedicated different days to different values. But that's a more modern thing. The reason that it's 8 days is because Sukkot plus Shmini Atzeret. Shmini is 8, the 8th day of convocation. So there's 8 days to the dedication rituals.
Okay.
And
I always wondered why
Yeah.
8. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay, that's what
Well,
I meant.
And of course, later on, not in Maccabees, and nowhere in Maccabees does it mention it, but later on, the rabbis are faced with a challenge. When Rome comes in and occupies, for lack of a better word, occupies Israel and Judea and Samaria, because they're occupying that land bridge. They want to connect Alexandria and all of that. And one of the things that you couldn't do in Rome, in the Roman Empire, was a crime called Mageus. And Mageus was saying or implying that anything was equal to or better than Greco-Roman culture. Now, that's a capital crime. You can be crucified for that. Imagine that. Because that was their preferred method of execution.
Okay.
So if you said anything that was the least bit disparaging of Rome, off you go, hoisted. And not a pretty picture. So in that scene, the rabbis are looking at Hanukkah. How are they going to deal with Hanukkah? Hanukkah is the celebration of overthrowing the Greeks and the Assyrians. Not going to play well when you're being occupied.
Yes.
Freedom celebrations do not work well. Throwing off the foreign oppressor and rededicating yourselves to God, not so good. And there's wonderful stories about the Roman official coming into the small town of Moda'in, and that's in Maccabees, and says to Mattathias, one of the priests in that town, do an offering to Zeus, slaughter this pig as a sacrifice, and you'll have all the riches you could want. You'll be a friend of the king, and blah, blah, blah. And he basically says, no. And somebody from the crowd says, I'll do it. I want to be a friend of the king, of the emperor. And Mattathias kills him in a fit of rage in the moment. And now he's got a problem, and he does what many people who shouldn't do. He solves his problem by killing the Roman officer that's there. So now he's got several problems. And Mattathias and his sons head for the hills and start a rebellion. Clearly that was in the works. Anyway, but that's... Yeah, and that's the story of Hanukkah. When they win, when the Maccabees, which is what they're called, or the Shmonaim, the 8, the Hasmonean dynasties, when they make it to Jerusalem, they conquer the city, get it back, cleanse the temple, and rededicate it. It's not ready in Sukkot, so they create a Sukkot-like holiday in Kislev, on the 25th of Kislev. And that's a festival of dedication of the temple, rededicating the city and the temple.
Wow.
And they start a dynasty that lasts for a few generations. The last link in that, here's the connection, the last link in that dynasty is a woman named Mariamne. There are no sons born that year. So she is Queen Mariamne. And what does a queen need? If a queen's going to have heirs, she needs a king. And somehow Herod is her husband.
What?
And that's Herod the
Like
Great.
the Herod?
The Herod the Great, Herod the Builder. And he's the one who builds the citadel of David around he rebuilds the walls around Jerusalem. So at the first glance, he sounds really, really good. But when you become paranoid, and he also builds Caesarea at the ocean for the Romans to land, for them to have a base, because he doesn't want them in Jerusalem. He knows they're not going to play well with the Judeans in Jerusalem because they've got images of the emperor in their banners, and they're also called the Red Ones because they have all that red cloth and plumage on their uniforms. And he also builds Masada. He builds Megiddo. He builds a number of different fortresses. Megiddo is Armageddon. So all of that, he's the builder. Now, what does it take to do building? Well, we can see it down in Port St. Lucie right now. If you're doing a ton of building, it takes workers and it takes money. You've got to feed and house and clothe all of those workers. So he's taxing like crazy. He's taxing way too much, and he's also putting people into conscripted labor. Nobody likes that.
Right.
Nobody likes either of those things. And there's a little sidebar where they say he's not really Jewish. What does that mean? Well, what had happened when the Hasmoneans come to power, they make one of those really horrible decisions. They are priests who become kings. And by Jewish law, that shouldn't ought to be. There's a separation of church and state early on in Jewish history, and they violate those rules. And because they do, there's nobody to tell them that their ideas are off the wall and crazy and don't do that. And so they go through and they forcibly convert everybody within their power to convert to Judaism.
So how did the Book of Maccabees wind up at the Vatican?
Well, somehow the books had gotten written. Somebody wrote them down. There's like 4 books of Maccabees, and I think 2 or 3 are in the Apocrypha. There's we have old books that didn't make it in, and there's what are called intertestamental books, which are the books that are in the Catholic scriptures, and they're usually considered Judean or Hebrew scriptures, and they're not in the Protestant version. So those are the books. Now there's different Bibles in the world. Sorry about that.
You've said that before.
Yeah.
So wait a minute.
So the Maccabees are in there.
The Protestant Bibles don't have...
They don't have those books because they're not part of Jewish scriptures, and they are much more interested in the New Testament, in Christian scriptures.
Right.
So it shortens the copying. And from the days when it was done by hand, it was a practical decision. Don't copy those. Don't include them. But the church, the Catholic Church, kept them, and I'm grateful that they did, because we get some information out of those books. So they have this dedication festival, but it also tells us about the forced conversion. And Idumea, which is where Herod is from, is one of those places that was forcibly converted. A couple generations back, I think, like Herod's grandfather, something like that. But Josephus, the historian, during the period of conflict between Judea and Rome, writes that the Idumeans converted by name only and still practice their religion. And that makes sense because, as we say, if you convince somebody against their will, they're of the same. Right? They don't stop. And we saw that in other times when that happens in Ferdinand and Isabel, rather, in Spain. The Jews that were forced to convert became hidden, as did the Muslims who were forced to convert. Those who didn't flee hid their Judaism or hid their Muslim practices. And surprise, that's not, you if you're going to convince somebody, you need to let them come to the conclusion, not tell them what their conclusions are. And certainly not at pain of death, because that makes what they believe in that much stronger. But dictators never figure that out. And so you've got a group that's saying, well, Herod really isn't doing the Jewish thing. And and besides that, he is definitely wacko. He's definitely wacko. He has 4 sons, all of which he names Herod, just to keep things interesting, which is why Christian scriptures are so confusing. Because there's Herod the Great, the father, and then he has Herod Antipas, Herod Agrippa, and 2 other Herods. So it keeps the books really confusing.
Just like George Foreman.
Exactly, and that's most of my classes come up with that that comparison. And what happens is that when Herod dies, his kingdom is divided up to his sons, but he keeps Mariamne under house arrest. So she dies in house arrest. And that's basically how he takes over the dynasty.
Nice guy.
You know, I hate to say this, but there aren't very many nice, kind rulers. Period.
You think?
Not then and not now. You don't get to the top of that heap by being kind, usually. It would be nice if you did, but it just...
Idealistically, you're correct.
Yeah. You know, I can remember sitting with Gabby Giffords in Tucson. She was all full of idealism of all the great things she was going to change. And I could watch on her face her frustration as she dealt with the machinery of politics, realities. And some of that, you know, in the end, it works out because things do migrate toward the good. But every once in a while, you get some crazy who knocks it off the rails, and it's got to get back on. We've seen that throughout history. And Herod was just such a character.
So fortunate that nothing like that would ever happen in these day and age.
No, there wouldn't be any megalomaniacs coming to power. We'll leave it at that. Anywhere in the world ever since then.
Oh my.
Yeah. And until we have a species change, that's going to be. Because that kind of attitude is an easy, quick way to satisfy human needs for the one who's cruel. Yeah, well, that's the whole thing of human needs. We have a need to feel safe, to feel that we're managing our life and that the walls are not going to cave in on us. We need variety. We need things to not always be the same, not every day. We need to feel important. And we need to feel love or connection. And violence, in its way, does all of those things.
Wow.
Because you have connection to your victim by victimizing them. You are certainly significant to them because they are powerless against you. It is a variety because you never know if they're going to try to rebel. And you're reasonably safe and certain that they're going to, for the most part, do what you dictate. So dictators will be there for a long time until we consciously don't allow that. But it's going to take the group doing that, not just the one person or two people that try to. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
It's just the way we are. And so Hanukkah is just one of those kinds of celebrations. And people didn't want to stop celebrating it. What else are you going to do over the winter solstice? You got to do something, and lighting up candles is a big thing. It's oil lamps, actually, in the old days. Candles, not until we have the technology for making candles. We don't think of that as being a technological advance, but it was. Before that, you put oil into a dish or a lamp, and you put a wick in it.
See, I never thought of that. Yeah.
Candles are a technological advance, just as light bulbs are, just as LEDs are now, and who knows what we'll have in the future. I'm sure that people in candle days had no idea of an electric-powered light or battery-operated. Although we do find some batteries in antiquity, some very crude, rough batteries that appear to have worked. The Ark may have been one. If you look at how it's made with gold around a non-conductor. Read the description sometime. It's a perfect battery. And that might be why the people who grabbed hold of it died. It probably was much more a capacitor making large noises periodically. But we weren't there, so we don't know exactly what technology they had or used, other than the descriptions. So Hanukkah prevails because the people want it. People want to celebrate it. And so the rabbis are left with, what do we do? How do we change this from being a political thing, a secular political, let's overthrow the Greeks, to something that can be more genteel? And so they come up with the story that there was only enough oil for one night and miraculously it lasted for 8. It doesn't take 8 days to make oil out of olives. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And so they come up with this story so that you are lighting the lights to proclaim the miracle of the oil, not so much.
Wow.
It codes it, because oil is used in the dedication as well. So you can kind of see how they've worked this around. and it's not a private holiday, because what you were supposed to do is put the lamps outside. Of course, that makes sense. You want the smoke and the soot outside. So it's very practical for it to be on the stoop of your house. It's where you would line up the lamps. And it comes into Talmud in a very interesting discussion, because they're saying if a cart of hay is drawn through the town and the hay catches on fire from the lamp on somebody's stoop, who's liable? Tort law. And the discussion continues, and it says, well, if it's an average day, then the homeowner is liable, because they should know not to put the lamp out where carts are going to come. But if it's Hanukkah, then the driver of the hay should know that Hanukkah lamps are going to be all over, and he or she needs to add caution to how they navigate the street. So if it's a Hanukkah lamp, then it's the driver is liable. It's an interesting set of laws. And then comes the big question: what is a Hanukkah lamp? And that's how they introduce the story of the oil lasting for all those days, and that celebrating the holiday is to proclaim the miracle of God intervening to keep the oil burning.
For 8 days.
For 8 days.
Wow.
And so if you listen today, then you'll see that, yeah, there might be a hint of that story, but there's much more the story of freedom and identity and nationality that come out in the holiday. So it becomes one of freedom, of light, of love, and so people look at 8 candles, and it makes sense that one of them is going to be for light, one's for love, one's for this, one's for that. And the definitions, of course, since this is a later interpretation, are more varied. And the secular Israelis in particular like the idea of lighting a candle for love, lighting a candle for freedom.
Sure.
And doing all that. And so they go through the nights. One of my favorite songs is Peter, Paul, and Mary's Light One Candle.
Oh, yeah. Sure.
Which is about
I remember
Hanukkah.
that.
Right?
Yeah,
Don't let the light go out. It's burned for so many years. And the first time I heard that, I got a lump in my throat. It was so beautiful. And we, of course, play it every year, and every concert I've been in for Hanukkah plays it, because it's a great, wonderful song. And that's just some of the Hanukkah songs that are there. But, yeah. So it's a holiday that won't die. And with the commercialization of Christmas, because that's something, if you look back through history, you'll find that U.S. legislatures passed laws on the 25th of December. It was no big day. It was a movement that came out of England to make Christmas bigger and brighter and more commercial. Thank you, Charles Dickens and his cohorts.
I thought Macy's created it.
Well, Macy's certainly wanted to play on the gift idea.
Sure they did.
And that catches on, because who doesn't want to give their kid or their loved one a gift? So gifts almost always catch on, and then it backwashes into Hanukkah. The traditional gift-giving season, Jewishly, used to be in the spring. But there's no requirement for any holiday to have. There's no requirement of gifts for Christmas. It's just latched on. Because we want to have a reason to give gifts, and it's as good a reason as any. And so Jewish kids get one each night, because you're lighting candles, and you want to. The point of the holiday is the 8 days, because that's the time it takes to dedicate a temple.
Yeah, we tried unsuccessfully to get the Jesuit priest to give us all of Hanukkah off.
Nice try. 8-day holidays.
Well, most of my class was Jewish, so I thought it would work, and was lobbying pretty hard for it.
I bet you were. You can work on Chanukah. I hate to tell you that the Jewish holidays you cannot work. The beginning of Passover, the end of it. Same with Sukkot. The beginning days and the end days are holidays. But yeah, even back then they knew that during the holiday you had to work. So the middle days are what are called chol, which is part of the holiday, but you work.
Rats.
Yeah. Passover is a little more challenging because of the requirement of not having leaven, so a lot of businesses do close rather than have to clean.
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah, that's why a lot of Jews go cruising or holiday during Passover, because it's easier than.
See, okay, but is it again? That goes back to nature again.
It does. Human nature too.
Yeah.
Holidays are definitely an expression out of our changing sensibilities with each other and ourselves. And so Chanukah is the festival of dedication, the dedication holiday. It's just one of the light festivals. There are so many. There are like 27 holidays between the middle of November and the middle of January. It's the holiday season for many traditions and many holidays and many religions.
So I was going to say, so the Hindus have something, and
everybody and a lot of the older cultures have lunar calendars, and so their holidays are going to appear to jiggle more. Now the Muslims, their calendar does not match to the solar calendar, and so they have 12 lunar months. Their year is shorter.
Okay, so how do they do that?
Well, they didn't tie it to the sun because Muhammad was a merchant, and so there wasn't the need to tie to crops. And so they match up with the solar calendar every 33 years. It takes a while for the calendar to cycle through. Whereas the Chinese calendar, the lunar calendar, the Hindu calendar, the Jewish calendar, all have leap years where they add a whole month because you can't cut the moon in half and restart.
You mentioned Chinese just now.
Yeah. That's why they have their Chinese New Year, and it varies January, February, because of the jiggle of the lunar calendar.
Have you had any contact with your former students there about the COVID?
I have
riots?
not. I've not.
I think that was. I've never seen anything like that in
I've
China.
seen some noise that I confess with my schedule I haven't pursued, but I got a notice that China reversed their no foreign teacher rule.
Oh.
And
Interesting.
but it's still somewhat restricted. It's only certain times and things like that. And I was told that a couple of my old students had actually requested me, but I haven't pursued it. So I may still, but it's been such a crazy fall and early winter that I'm lucky I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, you've been swamped.
I have been. IRSC just finished its term. Wonderful set of students, wonderful thing. But we had 2 hurricanes, and I personally had 3 funerals.
Mm-hmm.
It's a heavy year when I have 1, and we had 3 in this semester, so that impacted things. Just added to my workload.
Yeah, and the poor man who fell at Stewart's funeral.
Yeah.
I think it's just passed. Oh my. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, tough year.
Yeah, it's been a very tough year, and it just is, and there's nothing we can say to that. It is. So, IRSC students had a lot of leeway as a result in their assignments because I just couldn't hold them to the hurricane deadline, to the pre-hurricane deadlines, and Kaiser has another week and a half, another week. We'll be entering the 4th week next week, which is the finish of the fall semester and the D term. They do 1-month terms, 4 1-month terms per semester. And so they do fall A, B, C, D. And D will be ending. And, a little classroom break until January.
I was going to
both.
say, does Kaiser give
Yeah.
a break?
Kaiser gives a break. Students will start up on the 9th of January, and the same is true at IRC, actually. So, yeah, it'll be a very busy Monday.
Whoa, yes.
All those shells.
Do you have your schedule for the second semester?
I do. I have my schedule for spring, and I have the expected schedule for Kaiser, because there's always some jiggling and shuffling as students change their minds and different courses play out.
Now, you don't have to go down to West Palm.
No, it's right here
your
on the Port Saint Lucie campus. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, as we close this hour, that the Winter Festival and Car Show is at Kaiser this Saturday. So everybody's welcome to come out and see. I think I don't have the flyer here, but there's a ton of cars. They're gorgeous cars that are on display. The local Corvette group comes out, as do other makes of cars.
Okay.
So come and look at the cars. There's hay rides and pony rides for the kids, all kinds of activities. So that's this Saturday at Kaiser.
And for folks who don't know, it's right in Tradition.
It is just south of the hospital.
Right next to the hospital, yeah.
There you go. Look for Kaiser University on Discovery Way off of, or Innovation rather, just off of Discovery, whatever.
Gotcha.
In that area.
Yeah.
Close to 95. We can see 95 from the windows.
Right behind the old Torrey Pines.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So check that out and get there early so you can get parking.
Yes. Wow.
And we will be doing the Night of 10,000 Lights on the 23rd. More about that coming soon.
All right.
That's a teaser. We'll talk about that next week.
Well, and Cliff will see you next week.
You'll be traveling.
We have the toy giveaway.
Ah.
Yeah. And then IRC women's basketball that day. So it's, yeah.
Another busy day. It's a busy season.
Yes, it is.
So everybody stay safe. Whatever holiday you're celebrating, may it fill you with wonder and joy. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb, and this has been Ask a Rabbi.
You've been listening to Ask a Rabbi right here on WPSL, Port St. Lucie. Talk of the Treasure Coast, webcaster to the world on TuneIn.